don't wanna be cooped up. I just wanna feel your love. Deep breath and I'm waiting. Heart still anticipating. Close your eyes. It'll be just fine. I don't want to be cooped up. I'm sure many of us were having similar feelings at the beginning of the pandemic. And as a musician, fueled by the excitement of the entertainment industry, I struggled to know where to funnel my eagerness. See, I desired crowds and live music and community, and yet I was alone in my bedroom. But I wasn't alone in the experience of aloneness. See, I was one of many musicians whose world dramatically changed due to COVID-19. A few months before the pandemic, my company had just launched a record label. And so I thought to myself, how could I use this pandemic to create something, to give my community a voice, to remind them that what they're feeling and what they're experiencing right now matters. This moment will pass, and I want us to look back and see our resilience. Encouraged and inspired by this concept, I began collecting the music my community was making in their bedrooms. I was uncertain whether or not this project would go anywhere, but we soon became flooded with submissions, and I began to see the magnitude of what artists were going through during the pandemic. I want to show you a few artists from this project. Their experiences and their expression reflects the experiences of so many, maybe even yours. Let's rewind to mid-March of 2020. As the pandemic was beginning to escalate, flights were getting canceled, and some were even finding themselves stuck abroad. To have your loved ones close during times of uncertainty is a comfort that is unmatched. And though I wish everyone had access to that comfort during the first few days of the pandemic, I know that was not the reality for many. My friend Edwina Mabin wrote this song about unexpected outcomes that came of the pandemic, including her father not being able to come home from India.
I'll never again take it for granted. Handshakes, hugs, having people closer. I can't believe I thought I had the world predicted. Swear I'd live a week before the day was over. And they're telling everyone to stay indoors. And we are, and we're safe, and we're fed, and I shouldn't complain. But what do we do if you're not home? I don't know when I'll see you, but I hope you're doing okay. I wish we could have known about March. I would have told you to stay. I would have told you that ticket says round trip, but it would be one way. I wish we could have known about March, but at the end of the day, I hope we learn to march in the march that put you far away. I wish we could have known about. I'll never again take it for granted, making plans for whenever we would. I've never heard the world feel this quiet, but I've never felt fear feel this loud. And they're telling everyone to shut things down, and we are, and we're safe, and we're fed, and I shouldn't complain. But my friend won't get to walk in her cap and gown. I'm not sure of the words that I'm supposed to say right now. I wish we could have known about March to save our last days before being sent home without a graduation day. I wish we could have known about March, but at the end of the day, I hope we learn to march in the march that put you far away. Hey, this march will stay with me through my days. This march will stay with me through my days. I'll never again take it for granted, and in that sense I needed marching everywhere.
Relationships of all kinds were put to the test during the pandemic. There's no way to anticipate how our closest connections will be impacted by a global crisis. Unfortunately for some, the pressure of it all became too much, making an already difficult time even harder. My friend Caitlin Williams wrote this song during the pandemic about experiencing a breakup.
Wonder what it's like to erase our shit. Don't know why you'd wanna relive it. I lied to myself, saying I don't need help, but you're all I had. You went and took that so you could erase me. 3 whole years of life are just a faint memory. Don't know if you cry or if you remember me. Was I a waste of time? I ask this honestly. Are you erasing me? Erase me, erase me, erase me. Erase me, erase me, erase me. I can't take the pain, take the pain. Erase me, erase me, erase me. Wonder where you'll be when the lights go down. Who you see and who you keep around. Do you lie to yourself, saying you don't need help? Now I'm all I have, and You can take that, but you can't erase me. 3 whole years of life are just a faint memory. Don't know if you cry or if you remember me. Was I a waste of time? I ask this honestly. Are you erasing me? Erase me, erase me, erase me. Erase me, erase me, erase me. I can't take the pain, take the pain. Erase me, erase me, erase me. Erase me, erase me, erase me. Erase me, erase me, erase me. I can't take the pain. Erase me.
Though our individual experiences during this pandemic have been unique, we cannot deny the similarities of our struggles. Each one of us have been impacted to some degree, making this a profound, universal human experience. Fee Sullivan wrote this next song to remind us all that we are not alone in this.
One human, one touch, one rhythm of love. One human, one touch, same rhythm of love. Oh, 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 one human, same rhythm of love. We're not alone, we're not alone. I feel it in the eyes of the passerby. We're not alone, we're not alone. Let's hold each other up so we grow strong. I wanna stay, I wanna soar into a place I've never been before. I wanna laugh, I wanna cry from all the joys that make me feel alive. One human, one touch, one rhythm of love. One human, one touch, same rhythm. One human, same rhythm of love. We're not together we own. Thanks.
Thank you for journeying with me in witnessing how musicians captured the human experience during the pandemic. Even throughout a global crisis, artists never stopped creating, and their perseverance is a reflection of the resilience we've all held within us during these times of uncertainty. Thank you.
Wasn't that incredible? Ooh. So let's please give a rousing round of applause for Monalicious, Edwina Maben, Caitlin Williams, Connor Taronis, and Fee Sullivan. I am blown away. Oh my gosh. And I am so blown away that now I feel compelled to leave you with a video. That was so much fun. I want one of those. My backyard's not big enough. We're off to a great start to session 2, and I hope you have all enjoyed the exhibits and all of the things that you probably did during intermission. Did anyone win a golden ticket? Like, just yell. You haven't even looked under your seats yet? Are you kidding me? It could be new car keys or something. Okay, let me hear you if you have a golden ticket under your seat. Okay, I heard it over here. Congratulations. Let's give the winner a hand. Well, as we get started, just another reminder, be sure to keep your mask on while you're inside the theater, and please silence your cell phones. Now, I don't know about you, but I've been amazed at the sheer number of babies being born during the pandemic. Somebody's been busy. It's so bizarre not to be out and about, because when we're out and about, you see people that are pregnant. And sometimes I am on Facebook, and I see someone had a baby, and I had no idea that it was even on the way. So shout out to my new parents in the audience. You all deserve a break. Well, our next speaker is here to talk about parenthood and all the interesting ways we end up with little ones in our lives. She co-founded Colorado Fertility Advocates, was named Ally of the Year by the Colorado LGBT Bar Association, and is one of Denver's 40 under 40. She also writes a weekly column, you're going to love this, and co-hosts the podcast, I Want to Put a Baby in You. I mean, come on, that's the best podcast title I've ever heard. So please welcome to the stage Ellen Trackman.
Before his death in California in 1991, a man named William Kane wrote a letter to the children from his first marriage and to his fiancée, Deborah. It read, I address this to my children because although I have only 2 of you, Everett and Katie, it may be that Deborah decides, as I hope she will, to have a child by me after my death. I have been assiduously generating sperm samples for that eventuality. If she does, then this letter is for my posthumous offspring as well, with the thought that I have loved you in my dreams, even though I never got to see you born. What happened after William Kane's death was a lawsuit that would forever change the law. His ex-wife and adult children argued that Deborah should not be allowed to use the sperm samples. They should be destroyed. And a trial court agreed with them. But Deborah appealed, and a California appellate court agreed with her, finding that William Kane and all of us have the right to use our DNA after our death, even to have children. I'm sure everyone in this room has let their loved ones know if they can use their DNA to have a kid after they die, right? Okay, probably not yet. But what happens if we don't tell anyone, if we don't write it down? And what happens when a couple creates embryos together for use down the road, then divorces, or eggs and sperm are mixed up, or an embryo transferred to the wrong woman? Because all of these things have happened. Thanks to advances in technology, there are more ways to try to have a baby. But the law has lagged behind. And because the law hasn't kept up with the technology, it's hurting people. Families trying to conceive, donors and surrogates trying to help them, and the children born into these wild situations. And one day it could affect you or your loved ones. I'm an attorney, probably not surprising by my knowledge of egg, sperm, and the law. I started my career in the investment management group of a large international firm, forming hedge funds. At parties, when asked what I did for a living, my answer was generally followed by glances around the room for someone more interesting to talk to. But at that time, I was surrounded by people thinking about having babies. From my housemates who were a gay couple, to my sister and her husband struggling with infertility. And I learned about assisted reproductive technology law. I had the chance to read through an egg donation agreement, and it blew my mind. So many questions I had never thought of. What if an egg donor goes through a single retrieval procedure and has 20 eggs retrieved? Not a crazy number. Could those eggs be donated to 20 different families? Could each of those families have a child genetically related to her? What about disclosure and future contact? Would she know the children? Would the children know each other? I was fascinated. Way more interesting than hedge funds. But the law in this area will leave your head spinning. Even the definition of what is an embryo is inconsistent and contradictory from state to state. In Louisiana, an embryo is defined as a juridical person. What's that? Even the lawyers aren't really sure what a juridical person is. But we do know that it means that embryos stored in tanks at negative 321 degrees Fahrenheit have the right to sue people. And don't think they won't do it. Last year, celebrity actress Sofia Vergara of Modern Family fame and my favorite, Smurfs, was sued by her embryos. She had gone through fertility treatment with her ex-fiancé, Nick Loeb, when they were a couple. They had 2 remaining embryos from their IVF process stored in a clinic in Los Angeles. The consent forms they signed were clear. Neither could use the embryos without the other's consent. At this point, Vergara had moved on, married the actor from Magic Mike, Joe Manganiello. She did not want those embryos being used. Loeb, on the other hand, was doing everything in his power to win rights to the embryos. After losing in California court, he formed a trust for the embryos in Louisiana. He even named the embryos Emma and Isabella and had them file a lawsuit against Vergara, demanding that they be brought to birth. Ultimately, the lawsuit was dismissed for lack of jurisdiction, meaning Louisiana wasn't the right place to hear the case. The embryos were in Los Angeles, California. Neither Loeb nor Vergara lived in Louisiana. But given Louisiana's definition of embryos as people, it would have been fascinating and concerning if the court had been able to rule on the case. Of course, these were celebrities, so we got to read about their case in the news. But it could happen to anyone who's gone through IVF. That's more than 2 million people per year worldwide. By contrast to the idea that embryos are people, Other laws and judges treat embryos as property. In Texas, a probate judge was forced to determine the legal properties of 11 embryos when a couple was murdered, leaving behind their embryos and their 2-year-old son. The judge determined that embryos have value and therefore were property and should go to the couple's heir, the 2-year-old, to determine what to do with them when he turned 18. That's a heavy responsibility for an 18-year-old. Does he transfer them to a surrogate and raise his genetic siblings? Does he donate them to others? Does he forget about them entirely? Not likely that his parents were thinking about these questions when they formed those embryos. Aside from struggling with the definitions of eggs, sperm, embryos, and who can use them, the law especially struggles when there are mix-ups in the lab. In 2018, a woman in New York, pregnant with twins, was surprised at her ultrasound appointment when her obstetrician congratulated her on having 2 boys. You see, she had gone through IVF in California, and there her embryos had been tested and shown to be 2 female embryos. She called the clinic, but they said, "Don't worry about it. Ultrasounds are frequently inaccurate. You're having 2 girls." But she gave birth to 2 boys. And they didn't look like her or her husband. They did genetic testing, and she was not genetically related, nor was her husband. In fact, the twins weren't even related to each other. Across the country, a woman in California got a call from her fertility clinic. It had been about 9 months since she'd gone through a failed embryo transfer. She thought she was being asked to come in for routine testing, but was met with a room full of doctors, lawyers, mental health professionals that told her there had been a mistake. Her embryo had been transferred to another patient, and her genetic son had been born in New York, one of the twins. A judge in New York determined that the birth parents were not the legal parents of the children. Instead, the woman in California and her husband were legal parents to one of the twins, and another couple entirely were legal parents to the other twin because they were the genetic parents. But a similar thing happened in Italy with the exact opposite result. There, 2 embryos were transferred to the wrong patient, and a judge determined that the birth parents were the legal parents of the children, and the genetic parents had no legal rights at all to their own genetic children. It's time for the law to change. Here in Colorado, our lone egg and sperm donation statute has the language, "a wife with her husband's consent." It's a little offensive to us liberated women, but also doesn't include single parents by choice or LGBTQ parents. It also doesn't include those who donate their embryos or those who receive embryos to have a child. What can we do besides advocating for better laws? We can think carefully about our own reproductive material. Every adult knows that they should have a will, even if they haven't done it yet. A will lets those we leave behind know what to do with our assets and our possessions, but most wills don't include an invaluable asset, our reproductive material. And that leaves loved ones confused and facing inconsistent laws. For instance, in 2019, a West Point cadet named Peter Zhu was in a tragic ski accident. His family begged the hospital and then a judge to let them retrieve his sperm. They explained to the judge that their son had always wanted to have children, and moreover, it was of vital cultural importance to them to continue their family line. The judge was persuaded. He issued the order to allow the son's sperm to be retrieved and later used for conception purposes. But here in Colorado, the law is not the same. In the last few years, At least twice it's happened where a man was taken to the hospital before his death, and the request by a spouse to have his sperm retrieved was denied because he didn't have a consent on file with the hospital. But in another case, where a man died suddenly and was taken to the coroner, his spouse's request to have his sperm retrieved was granted because the coroner is not subject to the same policies and procedures as a hospital. So, if you think you might allow someone to have a child with your DNA after your death, or you don't want them to, tell them. Write it down. Grab a napkin, put it on a napkin, send a text, no matter how strange that text may look. It happens more often than you think. We think more carefully about organ donation, but this is just as important. I bet you didn't think you need to include this in your will. The world has changed. The technology is here, and it will only keep advancing. And this isn't the only area where technology is outpacing the law. We need to challenge ourselves to think carefully about what these innovations mean to ourselves, to our families, to our children, and to future children, whether they're genetically related to us or not. Thank you.
Wow, Ellen, that was truly fascinating. I learned a lot. Did you learn a lot? Whoa. So I'm curious, it seems like this is a state-by-state kind of a situation. So tell us a little bit about what the latest is here in Colorado.
Definitely. Can I give an apology first before I answer the question?
Of course.
So I want to say sorry to my children, who when I told them I was giving a TED Talk, they said, "Oh, you're talking about our dog Teddy?" So I'm so sorry that this one was not about Teddy. Maybe next time.
That's good.
Thank you for that question. So yes, the law is absolutely inconsistent between states to states. Colorado could clearly use some help and improvement in our law. But in good news, in Colorado we passed a surrogacy supportive law this May 2021 that supports intended, yes, woo, yes. It supports intended parents, surrogates, and children born by surrogacy, making sure they all have protections in place. So that is fantastic news for Colorado.
That's fantastic. Well, we thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you.
Let's give another hand to Ellen. It's awesome. Well, I feel like I've said this a million times before, but just in case you forgot, this is our 28th event in 11 years. This is amazing. As a nonprofit organization with limited resources committed to extraordinary change, this doesn't happen, and I know you know this, without extraordinary partners. We're thrilled to be collaborating with the Morris Animal Foundation on a series of presentations featuring animal health research around the globe. Keep your eye out in our post-event newsletter for links to 3 different virtual presentations. We're honored to partner with them, given their commitment to bridge science and resources to advance the health of animals. And once again, we give a big thanks to FEMA. I hope you had a chance to visit their virtual reality experience during intermission to help you visualize your own flood risk and learn how to better protect yourself before, during, and after disasters. And be sure to check out their virtual exhibit highlighted in the event program. With 120 million views of our videos and hundreds of presenters, TEDxMileHigh has grown its impact tremendously. We're committed to meaningful and lasting change over decades to come. And we're looking for several new strategic partners. If you want to contribute to a fast-growing cultural institution and align your organization with community and innovation, this is a great way to do it. Please feel free to reach out directly to TEDxMileHigh curator Jeremy Duhan. As a small nonprofit, organization, we rely on your generous support to make our programming possible. If you'd like to make a donation, you can text Rethink to 202-858-1233 to help support today's event. And when you give to TEDxMileHigh, you're advocating for education, civic engagement, and stronger communities. That's what the world needs more of. We're focused on solutions related to the world's biggest issues, and we believe that ideas can change the world. And the TEDxMileHigh stage is a catalyst for that change. Thank you for contributing to TEDxMileHigh to ensure we can offer similar programming in the future. You know, one of my personal and favorite things about TEDxMileHigh is the incredible mix of speakers and topics. Some are timeless, some are urgent, and that best describes our next speaker. She's a political geographer, Fulbright scholar, and professor at the University of Colorado Boulder, here to talk about her work in Afghanistan. Please welcome Jennifer Fleury.
I've studied women's rights in Afghanistan for 20 years. I've researched NGOs and civil society organizations, and I've conducted that research on the ground, learning from the men and women who live there. I've written academic books, articles, and taught on the subject. And as the last US troops left Afghanistan on August 31st, 2021, I've spent many sleepless nights poring over a spreadsheet of 154 names, 30 people I've worked with, and their immediate family members. Most are in hiding, for fear the Taliban will injure, imprison, or murder them. I get phone calls regularly, including this morning. What's the latest? What's happening? When can we get out? Some feared a Taliban resurgence, and so they got passports. Others were shocked it happened, that it happened so quickly, or that the capital city, Kabul, fell in a matter of days. And now, I can't stop thinking about a common Afghan joke my friend Seema told me many years ago. The Americans have watches, but the Taliban have time. The US came to Afghanistan with an outsized and outmatched level of technology, weapons, education, knowledge, and dollars. The Taliban, a draconian regime, began in the 1990s by radicalizing boys and young men from Afghan refugee camps in Pakistan. Many people mistakenly believed that the Taliban disappeared during the American occupation, but they were there all along, watching and waiting. The Americans have watches, but the Taliban have time. So this talk will be a post-mortem of sorts, looking back at the last 20 years at one of the many ways we failed by falling short and not listening to the women and men of Afghanistan, because we cared more about our rhetoric, our politics, and our propaganda than we cared about them. After the US-led invasion of Afghanistan on October 7th, 2001, the Bush administration faced a public backlash, and so they directed our attention to a new goal. We Americans can save Afghan women from the brutality of the Taliban. Billions of dollars of military, humanitarian aid, and economic development assistance flooded into the country. But those dollars came with a certain agenda. You may recall George W. Bush's mission accomplished photo op after the invasion of Iraq. The media joked about it. But that photo op is indicative of a larger problem. Far too many international efforts to help the women of Afghanistan were, in today's parlance, all for the gram. For example, early efforts to reconstruct Afghanistan, newspapers published photos of shiny new buildings with children standing in front. because that kind of thing looks like progress to us. But for many Afghans, daily life remained under threat. New school buildings were easy targets for insurgent violence and bombings. So many parents basically kept their children safe at home. I met many women whose own work was photographed and put online as if to say, look what we've done for the women of Afghanistan. Which would have been great, except for many of those international organizations may have funded projects, but the difficult work of implementing them happened by Afghan women themselves, while the international organizations took all the credit. Fahima, for example, started a carpentry business in her hometown. And when I first met her, I said, wow, you look so familiar. She didn't know why. And then I remembered I'd seen photos of her online. I pulled the website up on my laptop and I showed it to her. She became so upset because she had not given them permission to take, let alone use her picture on their website. In fact, she didn't even recognize the name of the organization. Far too many international organizations were more interested in looking like they were helping than actually helping the women in Afghanistan. In other cases, international organizations believed because they had the money to spend, they knew best how to help. The media also perpetuated the US government's obsession with unveiling Afghan women as a path to their liberation. Many Americans can't imagine wearing a veil, let alone a burqa, so removing it must be a solution. We were eager to see their faces. But when I spoke to different women across Afghanistan, I learned that this piece of clothing is a problem for few, a minor inconvenience for some, and simply part of their daily wardrobe choices for many. Many women told me they were happy to wear the veil because it meant they could go places. Removing the burqa or chadri was what we focused on, which quite literally veiled the actual acute and diverse needs of Afghan women. We were so fixated on the idea that Islam is a religion of oppression that we failed to recognize that it could actually be used as a tool for women's rights. In Afghanistan, the social structure of the country centers around the family and Islam as a guiding belief system. So many of the gains for women's rights over the last 20 years occurred because women's rights activists worked with men and within Islam, using the Quran as a guide to improve women's lives. For example, there are some customary practices in Afghanistan that use marriage to bridge divides between families in conflict, where a man from one family has significantly injured or even murdered a man from another family, and there's a clear perpetrator and victim. A woman, a young woman, from the perpetrator's family will be given to the victim's family. The idea being that you will resolve the conflict and avoid future conflicts by joining the two families together through a marriage. May sound good on paper, but in reality, many of these women who experience these exchanges live a torturous existence. They're mistreated or abused as punishment for their relative's crime. Now, here's the interesting thing. This practice is completely haram, forbidden in Islam. So women's rights activists have worked with male religious leaders, imams and mullahs, to eradicate these practices in their local communities. Not because it goes against Western feminism or international human rights, but because it's forbidden in Islam. Advocating for Afghan women within an Islamic framework has and could continue to work in Afghanistan. However, the Taliban's radical and extremist interpretations of Islam leave little room for women's rights. They manipulate Islam. They do not represent Islam. They don't listen to women. But have we? when you take the time to listen, to understand what people are struggling with and what they need, when you truly understand their culture and you see them as fellow humans, then you can begin to work together to improve people's lives. But instead, according to the US government's own reports, we spent many billions of dollars in Afghanistan without providing a sustainable program to improve women's lives. Rather than listening, we try to impose our values, posting self-congratulatory photos online, when many of the real successes happen on a small scale, in communities, at a local level, by, with, and for the women of Afghanistan. But like I said, many women's rights activists have left or are desperately trying to leave the country. Neela, for example, was the director for several schools run by a small Afghan organization. She's a feminist and a women's rights activist, but many Americans wouldn't recognize her as such because she dresses so conservatively. She ran schools to help young girls catch up to their male peers and then join the larger school system in Kabul. She hired female teachers, and she organized women's job readiness trainings. But now, she's in hiding. Her teachers are unemployed, and the mission of her organization is effectively dead under the Taliban's new regime. Already, the Taliban has banned girls and women from attending high schools and colleges. Now, many schools are fighting back, but most women and girls fear that education will move underground again as it did in the 1990s, happening in secret throughout the country. As we speak, every woman in government is gone. In most likelihood, many women will continue to work at home as part of an informal economy. But what will happen to their hopes and dreams? And this just goes to show you how complicated the situation is. In the absence of the Taliban, many women flourished, but not always as a direct result of US-funded programs, while economic assistance is still desperately needed. It was because the US was a bigger bully than the Taliban. In the absence of Taliban control, many women found space to advocate for themselves. Luckily, Afghan women won't give up fighting. Their strength and resilience will endure. But I've received so many tearful phone calls over the last 2 months. How could your country do this to us? You abandon us. And it's true. We did abandon them. And now we must do everything we can to help those get out. To work with our allies in neighboring countries to keep those who cannot leave safe from harm. But it's really not good enough, is it? Because we've made these mistakes before. Afghanistan is just the tip of the iceberg of US involvement in the world. If we look at the countries the US has invaded and aided, they remain largely unstable. In Afghanistan, the regime we ousted is now back in power. The war in Iraq led to the creation of ISIS, and the Iraqi government continues to use torture, arbitrary arrest, and excessive force against its own people. These US military and development engagements throughout the world may make us feel safer, but they have not created economic or political stability in those places. If we really want to help people around the world, if we really want to help women, we must rethink, reconceptualize, and reconsider how and why we intervene in other countries. Institutional knowledge and a deep historical understanding of a people and their place does not look good in a campaign ad and is difficult to harness into a soundbite. But it's the only thing that works. We have the skills and ability to listen and understand, and we choose not to at our peril. Afghanistan is a lesson for us all. If we rethink, we can do better. Thank you.
Jennifer, thank you so much for all that you're doing, and particularly all of the things you've done over the past couple of months. We thank you. I'm sure there are many people in the audience that are wondering the same thing that I often wonder, and that is, what can we actually do to help the men and women of Afghanistan who are just now arriving here in the U.S.?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the organization I'm working with, which we're collecting donations to help people when they arrive, is called rubiahandwork.org. So that's one place. And then the Department of State in Colorado, the state of Colorado, on their website, they do have special resources for Afghan refugees to welcome people, learn more about the culture. Also, Lutheran Family Services is an excellent organization that is also here in Colorado that does a lot of work to help refugees when they come to integrate into the community and meet friendly faces. So those would be the ones I would recommend.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. You've given us a lot to think about.
Thank you.
So we want you to think some more as you watch the next video.
Thank you.
It's so beautiful. As I mentioned, or did I mention that this is the 28th event in 11 years? Yeah, it is. And it takes a huge team of committed people working year-round to produce an event like this, and I want to recognize them. Would you join me in just giving a huge round of applause to the team? And while you're at it, I also want to thank our advisors and all of the week of volunteers who helped make this event possible. And a special shout out to our superheroes, donors, and TEDxMileHigh insiders this year. Let's give all of them one last round of applause. So before we hear from our final speakers, we're excited to announce that our next event will be held in spring 2020. And you know that's right around the corner, like it's tomorrow almost. As an attendee today, you'll receive an email with more information this week. And please join us for our upcoming adventures, including a presentation on, listen to this, on why dogs get arthritis and how to prevent it. Bonus, if you're a human with arthritis, turns out dogs are pretty similar to humans in that way. So you might just learn something about yourself, even if you don't have a furry friend. That event is on October 27th in partnership with the Morris Animal Foundation. On November 6th, join FEMA for a virtual adventure where you and your family can put your disaster preparedness skills to the test. And finally, if you'd like to continue the conversation tonight, we hope you'll join us at the Edge Bar immediately following the event. To get there, turn right out of the theater, make a left on 14th Street, walk 2 blocks, and the Edge Bar is on the right. Okay. I'm dating myself. Just type Edge Bar into Google Maps or Waze, or at least that's what my kids tell me you're supposed to do. Now, let's head back to the final stretch of the program. Kenya Mahogany is a spoken word artist, actress, and playwright, and the co-founder and chief creative officer of 5280 Artist Co-op. She creates stories to normalize people of color and to change their narratives. Please join me in welcoming Kenya Mahogany.
I am the proud mother of 2 beautiful, energetic kids, young, gifted, and Black. But as a mother, I am afraid that one day they will be funneled into the school-to-prison pipeline. So my husband and I, he, a math teacher, 8th grade math teacher, who's actually running for DPS School Board District 4, so if you see Gene Fashaw, I'll go ahead and bubble that in. And myself, him and I, are dedicated to changing that narrative for our kids and all kids. This poem is just simply titled, No More School to Prison Pipeline. The kids are our focus. Let's show them what love is. Let's build a foundation where they could fly from. For enough is enough. It's time to disrupt school to prison pipelines. No more school to prison pipelines. Can the biased mind of a white teacher actually tell the difference between a misbehaving black or brown student versus an energetic one? A question that only amazes some who catch that virus of implicit bias on a tantrum. Now let's not pretend. When we all know the only threat for that teacher from those students is the lethal weapon of their skin. Those students, no longer included, feels exclusion setting in. And what the teacher doesn't comprehend is that the battle is not with them, no, but it's within. Y'all, I'm tired. I'm tired of false perceptions on repeat. Student kicked out school, students out on street. Student not given a chance all because they seemed off beat. Not understanding the upbeat of their unique is passionately sweet. See, we teach black and brown students to be managed while white affluent students are taught to manage. Wow, what an advantage. If only half of those students had that advantage planted, they wouldn't be feeling so abandoned. Aggressive actions of an educational system that have left them stranded. So I say, blow up that pipeline from schoolyards to prisons, for this is not the only option that they've been given when ultimately the root of their crime was just being black, just being brown and living. What I suggest is, retain more teachers of color so that we can have these students see themselves reflected. A culturally diverse staff that will lay the foundation for all kids to feel accepted. Cultural connection, creating restorative justice, and reforming the system into a better direction. What we need, different tactics. Readjusting lenses. Zero tolerance rules in our schools are not how we're going to cleanse this when it's long overdue. That certain teachers need to be properly trained on how to handle the outcries of our youth. For anything that is not led with love, I see no use. Please, pour out water onto these seeds. See how beautifully bright and big they grow, because we'll never know what our future holds if we keep their future on hold, but proceed with care. Know that mistakes are going to be made, but we must adjust the punishment, for the price is too high to be paid. All the kids really need is an ear, which is completely free. The feeling of knowing, wow, somebody actually listened to me. Parents, educators, teachers, be the positive influence to spark a mind that is great. Because the weight of a positive influence is how we get this pipeline to break. For our kids are the focus. Let's show them what love is. Let's build a foundation where they could fly from. For enough is enough. It's time to disrupt school to prison pipelines. No more school to prison pipelines. That's that piece. Thank you, guys. Thank you. So my second poem, my last poem, is dedicated to everyone who is suffering, or anyone who is suffering with mental illness, especially over these last 2 years, right? I just want to say thank you. I'm glad that you are still here, and thank you so much for showing up for yourself every day. This poem is called Smile. Every morning I wake up. I take a paintbrush and I dip it into the color of mahogany. I take that same paintbrush and begin to paint a smile on my face. Looking in the mirror closely so that I can fill in, all those blotches of abandonment and abuse. No excuse, just cover, girl. Cover up those black-headed secrets you've had hidden inside your pores for years. Or try Maybelline, or maybe lean to the left. Maybe they'll miss your missteps. Inhale, breath. Now go out into this world, girl. Don't forget to smile. My smile. I often mistake it for attire. Putting it on one smirk at a time. Hoping that I don't go out into the world to catch words of fire. Those same old lines that people ask, like, hey, how you doing? So I have to smile audaciously and say, I'm fine. Knowing deep down inside that anxiety has moved in on my mind, heartbeats increasing and increasing, depression. It's been hungry, been feasting. But no time to feel, gotta push through. No time to deal because that's what grandma them say do, right? They say, pray about it, baby. Don't let it get to your head. But grandma, prayer without faith and work is dead. How do you go to the hospital to check on the illnesses of your body instead on what your mind is being fed? So I smile. Because I am black and I am a woman. Feeling like I have to smile because I am a woman and I am black. No matter what I'm stressing, I'm always having to smile through this double oppression. I smile so that people are comfortable with this flesh. Because God forbid I'm seen smiling while black. And now they see that as a threat. So how do you cope? J. Cole, the greatest rapper alive, said, it's better to meditate than to medicate, and I think that's dope. But J. Cole, what about the ones so entrapped inside their minds they can't seem to find their hope, hoping that this ill mental will get easier to battle with thoughts that are so harsh, but at the same time so fragile? Mask on, mask off, mask off. Mask on, smile big, smile bright so they don't ask, hey, are you okay? What's wrong? I heard him say that it was okay not to be okay. So how do you stay afloat? For me, I lift the corners of my mouth because these days, that's the only way it seems that I cope. See, I smile every now and then. See, I smile even though I hurt. See, I smile 'cause I know God is working, so I smile. I smile. Thank you, Tizok.
Thank you, Kenya. That was just beautiful. Your words are strong and powerful and important. Wow, can you believe that we've made it to our final presenter already? You're supposed to say, no, I don't believe it. I'm going to miss you guys. And I have to tell you, this has been a lot of fun for me to be on stage, the very stage where in 2019 I was a TEDx speaker. It's been amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you. I hope that you have been able, no matter how small or how big, that you've been able to make some lasting memories in your time here today. Our final presenter has built a career around preserving memories. Preserving legacies. She's the founder and president of the History Makers, the largest national collection of African American video oral histories on record since the WPA slave narratives. To close out the program, please join me in welcoming Juliana Richardson.
Thank you. Good evening. As a little black girl, I did not know that American history had anything to do with someone who looked like me. American history was George Washington cutting down his cherry tree. American history was white. Raised in a small steel mining town of Duquesne, Pennsylvania, my family moved to Newark, Ohio, not New Jersey, but Ohio, where there were 1,000 blacks out of 50,000 whites when I was age 9. And one day, the teacher asked us to talk about our family backgrounds. My classmates' hands literally rose up like arrows to the sky. I'm part German, I'm part Italian, I'm part French, I'm part Polish, Jewish. They all had hyphenates. What was I? The only thing that we studied back then about black people were the other George Washington, Tuskegee Institute's George Washington Carver. And my white teacher said he could do a lot of things with peanuts. And then there was the taboo issue of slavery, and no one wanted to be associated with slavery. So to my 9-year-old brain, those two facts together did not compute. How could he have done all those things with peanuts when all we had been were slaves? So I mumbled something like Negro or black, Native American, because most black people think they have Native American blood in them. And I added in French, I lied. My father had been stationed in France, but I wanted to have a history also. That sense of not knowing and not belonging stayed with me until my sophomore year at Brandeis University. I remember it like it was yesterday. It was a fall day. The leaves were a golden brown, and I'm in New York Schomburg's library with my headphones on, listening to this song. I'm just wild about Harry. Harry's wild about me. This song that I associated with President Harry Truman, I had found, who was a white president, I had found in a black music collection in a black library written by a black songwriting team of Noble Sissel and Eubie Blake in the 1921 production of Shuffle Along on Broadway. I was thrilled, and I went up to the librarian, the famous librarian, Jean Blackwell Hudson. She gave me a list of people to interview, and I had my tape recorder in hand. Today it would be an iPhone, and I went out and interviewed Gone with the Wind's Butterfly McQueen, Lee Whipper, who was the oldest living black actor at the time, historian John Henry Clark, and tap dancer Honey Coles. I had found myself. I had a history to call my own. I too, according to Langston Hughes, I too am America. And from that day forward, my life was forever changed. Today, from our boardrooms to our classrooms, on TV and social media, debates are raging about whose history matters. Those who document their history are who society says matters. For the black community, that documentation has been elusive. How many of you had heard about Tulsa and its Black Wall Street until recently? Let me see a show of hands. Great. But there are those who don't. How many of you knew that at one time in the United States there were 3,000 black towns? I have a good audience here. So those towns, whether it was Mount Bayou or Blackton or Allensworth or Nicodemus, the list went on. Black people went from having absolutely no rights to the US electing its first black president. Our civil rights gains paved the way for the women's movement, the gay rights movement, and the social movements of today. In the 1960s, we had found ourselves, and James Brown led the way. Say it loud. I'm black and I'm proud. Come on. Come on. Say it loud. I'm black and I'm proud. Say it loud. I'm black and I'm proud. Say it loud. I'm black and I'm proud. He did it for us. That became our national anthem. And recently, I attended the estate sale of Porgy and Bess's Etta Moulton Barnett. She had the famous contralto voice. And her husband, Claude Barnett, Pan-Africanist, who was founder of the Associated Negro Press, in their home, literally was clothing and furniture and rare books and artwork that demonstrated the fineness of their lives. But as I approached one room, I looked to my side and I saw something I should not have seen there. There were family photographs and letters and scrapbooks. As the estate seller yelled out, "Cash and carry," I told her, "You can't do that, not with this." A local university had offered $3,000 for the entire collection. I told her, "Please give it to me. Honestly, I'll take it and preserve it. These are family heirlooms." She told me it would be $250,000. $250,000? I don't have that. I bought the little I could. But that priceless, intact, one-of-a-kind collection from that day forth of rich Black history, 100 years of rich Black history, was henceforth scattered to the wind. The same thing happened at the estate sale of poet Maya Angelou. And if that does not resonate with you, then I want you to think forward at the estate sale of young poet laureate Amanda Gorman, that her writings and her poetry would suffer a similar fate. We have in this country already lost a lot of the 17th, 18th, and 19th century documentation of the African American experience. We can ill afford to lose the 20th and the 21st century. Preservation will determine if the Black community is viewed as valueless or valueful. Consider 17-year-old Darnella Frazier and that 9 minutes and 29-second recording of George Floyd's murder, and the complete disregard that it showed society having of Black life. We in the Black community have always had value. It's just been hidden from view, not well documented. Over 20 years ago, I sat at my dining room table. I was unemployed, no kids, and single. And you get to the point in your life when you start asking, what will be your leave behind, your legacy? And those stories of my sophomore year came back to me. I took my love of the theater, my degree in American Studies, my legal training from Harvard Law School, and I set out to create the nation's largest African American video oral history archive. Thank you. Thank you. It's called The History Makers, and back then, lots of people had thought I had lost my mind. But we've interviewed thousands and thousands of African American leaders. One early interview was of civil rights leader Julian. We had traveled from Chicago to Washington, D.C. We had asked him to bring photos of him, and one of the photos was like the one here. And when he walked into the room, literally, I was taken back to my 12-year-old self and my serious crush on him when I had seen him. Look at those curls. Chairman of the NAACP, he had been one of the student leaders for SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. At the tender age of 25, he had been elected to the Georgia House of Representatives. Georgia being Georgia then and now, and there being no Stacey Abrams in sight. They refused to seat him, and his case went up to the US Supreme Court, and he won. He was seated. Another early interview was of Tuskegee Airman, Colonel Bill Thompson. We arrived at Colonel Thompson's house, and he had prepared for us for 4 days. He had boxes and boxes of material that are now housed at the Air and Space Museum at the Smithsonian. He sits me down. He says, "Do you know of the Golden 13? I said, "No, Colonel Thompson, I've never heard of the Golden 13. He said they were the Navy's version of the Tuskegee Airmen, and there are 4 left living in the country, and 1 lives upstairs. And he'd like to talk to you also." It was at that moment that I knew that we were on a path of great discovery. 4 years later, I'm seated next to General Colin Powell. Of course, I try to get him to interview with me. He so politely declines. Then I tell him my Colonel Bill Thompson story. He tells me about the Montfort Marines, that they were the Marines version of the Tuskegee Airmen. The Tuskegee Airmen, the Navy's Golden 13, the Montfort Point Marines. All 3 helped desegregate the US Armed Forces, but unfortunately, most people only know of the Tuskegee Airmen. We have such an opportunity to make change. Our crews have traveled to 413 cities and towns across the United States. Our collection is housed permanently in the Library of Congress. Our digital archive, thanks to the computer geniuses at Carnegie Mellon, is now accessible worldwide, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, on all kinds of portable devices and computers and phones. We have interviewed, as I said, thousands of African American leaders. There's Alonzo Petty, the oldest living Black cowboy, Katherine Dunham, the inventor of Black dance, Katherine Johnson, the NASA scientist whose story was portrayed in the movie Hidden Figures, poets Nikki Giovanni and Sonia Sanchez, and Ursula Burns, the first Black female CEO of a Fortune 500 company. We are now the digital repository for the Black experience, and it will include those digitized copies of the family heirlooms that I spoke of us losing. When I think back on my 4th grade self, I have such compassion for her. A little Black girl in a sea of white faces in rural Ohio. Little did she know that Black history was all around her. Yards from her home was the first Black school built for Black children by a man named Shackelford, who sat at gunpoint, daring any white mob to tear down his school for Black children. Her hometown of Newark, Ohio, was also the 1815 birthplace for Edward James Roy, who had tired of life in America and migrated back to Africa, and in 1870, he had become the 5th president of the African country of Liberia. What if she had known that being president of a country would be possible for someone who looked like her? What if her classmates had known that history and that would have changed their views and their world experience? You all know that I'm that little girl. And when I had spoken to General Powell, he told me that no one can change their yesterdays, but all of us can change our tomorrows. I ask you today to join with me in changing America's tomorrows so that the Black community and its experience and its history will have an undeniable place and permanent place in this great country and in America's lexicon. I also ask you to join me so no child will ever feel that way that I felt in that classroom when I did not know the history that was my legacy. We can all work together and make this happen. Thank you for listening to this little Black girl's story. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Juliana.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was just incredible. Now I'm going to ask you to stay on stage with me and scoot back a little bit.
Sure.
Now you get to be first to pick where you want to stand because we now are having all of our speakers join us. Yes. Yes. So first of all, and then I'll get out of the way because what's behind me is most important. Thank you so much for joining us today. I just want to thank each of you for that. This, again, is our first live in-person event in almost 2 years, and we're very excited about that. Please know that you mean the world to us, and we're so grateful that you are here. So I want to scoot out of the way. And let's let this illustrious group of speakers take their final bow and give them some love. Good night, everybody.